I know in all of our work, we want to make sure that we are optimizing our relationships with our colleagues, that we're extending the impact of philanthropy in the most meaningful way. But one of the things that we run up against sometimes is culture. Culture is, I've said, like the wind. It may be invisible, but its effects are everywhere. And when we look at the culture of an organization, it brings together what people believe, how they act, the words they use, the way they make decisions, the normative behavior. It's everything that comes together to talk about how we get things done, how we work around here, how we partner with each other. And so what we found is over and over again, if you build tactics and strategy without paying attention to culture, you often are creating efforts that are not sustainable, that are not fully integrated into the life of the organization. I see that it's often like this iceberg here, that we're often being very busy creating strategy and doing work, but often that work, if it's not rooted to the rest of the organization, falls flat. As we think about culture, building a culture for philanthropy means that philanthropy is fully integrated into, woven into the life of the organization. We're not a bolt-on. We're not something that sits over here and is separate. We're not something that is tangential to the overall life of the organization. Simply, we are part and parcel of everything going on within that organization. So today I want to walk you through various aspects of a culture for philanthropy. And frankly, as we walk through this, I'm going to start with the things that I think are most simple, most basic, the things that we must have. And then we'll kind of push to the things that not all organizations actually get to that point, but things that are also kind of part of the bonus round, so to speak. So if you have any thoughts and questions, I realize this is a big room, but I also would invite you to jump up, shout out if there are any things that you want to share as we go forward, because I realize that this is a room full of colleagues, a room full of people who care each other. And so I want this to be a conversation if you need it to be a conversation. So first, as you can imagine, fundamentally, we need to look at how philanthropy is aligned with the mission, vision, and values of our institution. How does philanthropy support and extend those values? How does philanthropy elevate and lift those values? How is it part of the organization in a way that is incredibly meaningful and thoughtful? We have to go back first to make sure we've got that alignment there, because that's the base we build everything on. We also know, frankly, building an ambition around philanthropy is hollow if the core work of the organization is not excellent. You know, philanthropy to me is about a deep form of engagement with prospective partners. And if we're going to have deep engagement, it means that we first need to have an organization whose mission is deployed well, that we have good programs, that we have quality, that we have service, that we are meeting the needs of the multitude, as Derek said, that our mission is true and our mission is right. And so having at the very beginning that integration against the mission, vision, values of our organization and the organization that deploys things well is the bedrock on which everything else is built. I think you've then got to look at what the role of philanthropy is in the organization. I realize there are people in this room that philanthropy is your lifeblood, that your organization simply would not exist. It would not be able to deploy the programs it has without philanthropy. There are others in this room that philanthropy is the path to elevation or to competitive advantage, to doing the things we dream to do, to being our best version of ourselves as our organization. Whatever role philanthropy plays in your organization, I would say that it has an essential and vital role. Certainly, we all want to see our organizations thrive and reach their vision of potential. Anything less is a failure to serve our constituents. And so philanthropy, whether you have other revenue resources or not, is something that is essential to the organization achieving its dreams. So we need to work with our colleagues, especially in the organization, to make sure they understand the role of philanthropy, that they're aware of the impact that philanthropy has made on the organization to date. I think sometimes we are invisible. We've pulled together wonderful colleagues who've stepped forward to say, this work is aligned with my work, with my purpose, with my values, and I want to be part of it. But we don't always highlight the power of that work, and so we need to let people know what the role of philanthropy is in the organization. One of the most fundamental steps that happens after that is simply having the organization embrace that they are a charitable endeavor that is worthy of support. I know that sounds kind of odd, but especially in big organizations, like, for example, our hospitals, like our academic organizations, sometimes we don't embrace that we are a charitable organization that is worthy of support. We look down the street and we see, say, a social service organization, and we say, yes, I can see how people deem them to be a charitable organization. However, we need to embrace that we are also worthy, that we are also mission-driven, that we are also passion-fueled, and invite people to be part of that. And if we as an internal stakeholder in the organization are willing to embrace that, it means we can create a much more rich and resonant relationship, not only within our organization and its stakeholders, but within the greater community. So here's the turning point for many of you. We know that you may be able to go out and establish some credibility within your organization to let people know philanthropy is vital, to let people know that this is a mission that is worthy of support. But there's a point at which leadership is essential. You have to have the buy-in, ownership, and modeling. You have to have the visible symbol of participation from the senior leadership of the organization to be able to push culture further. Simply, there are things in our organizations that can bubble up from the bottom, but there are some things in our organizations that need to push down from the top. People across the organization need to be able to look at our leaders and see that they are walking this talk, that they are living this mission, that they are fully embracing philanthropy. It's about how they infuse talk about our charitable partnerships in their language. It's how they position our work in the overall organization. I find that when leaders are engaged, part of what they can do is the cultural heavy lifting to start to say philanthropy is valued, philanthropy is positioned well for credibility, philanthropy is resourced well in our organization, philanthropy is something that we make plans around and we consider as we're going to go forward as an organization. Doing that cultural heavy lifting is often something you cannot do on your own. People have to look at the leaders in the organization and see them model that work. What we also see is that when leaders are involved and invested, the rest of the organization, participation starts to unfurl from the inside out. And so as your leaders become engaged, they help engage your board members. As your board members become engaged, they help involve your other volunteers, your physicians, your faculty, other stakeholders in the organization. And ultimately, it rolls out to the larger community. So you've got to think about almost that chain of events of who's going to influence whom, who's going to engage others, who's going to make this something that is, again, rich and resonant and meaningful for the organization. So the next thing that starts to occur in the organization is the ability to really authentically share your story. You know that everyone on the front line of your organization lives the mission every day. They wake up thinking about the constituents you serve. They wake up thinking about the services that you're going to provide. However, starting to weave that into a narrative where philanthropy is also part of that authentic and genuine story of the organization is kind of the next step along this culture journey. It again sounds like something very simple, but to make sure that we talk about the role of partnership alongside the role of our plans. If we can then start to help those on the front line understand why donor partners want to be involved with us, I think it's important to talk to them about the emotive response that donors have, that they want to look and see how our work touches the lives of people. Derek, again, it goes back to everything you just said. I'm so glad you brought those beautiful words to us today. To look out with compassion upon the people we serve. Our donors are often, as you know, doing good not to us, but through us. They're looking out at your community. They're wanting to know how you're going to improve the lives of people. They're wanting to know how you're going to make the world better. And so being able to connect people to the values that donors bring to this work is very important. And having that sensitivity also starts to weave our story in a different way. We've also got to talk to our colleagues, our board members, our other stakeholders about the importance of impact. We know that even 10 years ago, we had a lot of donors that gave for almost impulse-driven reasons. Now we find that so often our donors are impact investors. They're wanting to look at the organization and know that we have the ability, the credibility, the resources, and the resolve to affect real change. They want to know what those outcomes are that we do propose. They want to know what our plan and our path is to executing upon those things. And so helping them understand that we must be able to articulate the good we have in mind and our path to achieving it is another important part of shaping our narrative with our community. As we start to do that, this starts to take on another different dimension in the organization where people can start to connect donors' ambitions to participate with the outcomes that they want to achieve. I think it's also important to weave into our organization the ability of our colleagues and our other stakeholders to enunciate the case for support, the rationale for fundraising. You know, how through philanthropy, through partnership, through advocacy, through ownership, can we elevate what we're doing? But one of the dimensions of that I think is really important is it is not a story of scarcity. It is not a story of need. It is a story of abundance. And we've got to be able to position that in the right way, that we don't go and say, our pockets are empty, our cupboards are bare, we don't have enough. We go instead to them and say, we have a vision for what we could do for this community. We believe that vision is right. And we need your assistance to get there because we see the opportunity. We know what we could do. And your participation means we can get there faster and to a higher level. Being able to engage our donor partners in this way, again, starts to make this more meaningful. No one wants to give to the organization that is challenged. They want to give to the organization that is visionary, that has resolve, and that wants to get to the right place. I think one of the other dimensions you've got to consider there is it's hard sometimes in our organizations that you have different presentations of the mission in the community. That sometimes you have one message going out from the foundation or philanthropy department, you have another face with the marketing department, you have another face with the volunteerism area. And so what you've got to realize is your community cannot separate your brand assets. Your community sees everything that comes with your organization's name on the top as coming from one place. And so your voice, your facts, the way you talk about your organization needs to be consistent. This is a place where we often have a lot of challenges, that we often have a breakdown between particularly the philanthropy side of the organization and the marketing side of the organization. But we need to look at opportunities for synergy, for alignment, and for partnership. We also need to look at working in collaboration with other parts of the organization as a way to be a good steward of our resources, to leverage all the, say, real estate we have in various publications, to extend the same message through the same platforms and channels. If we can start to collaborate in a meaningful way, it both extends the resources of all aspects of the organization and ensures that cohesive presentation of the mission to the community. I know that this is a place I meet so many nonprofit executives that they're frustrated, that they feel they can't get there, that they sometimes feel like even though they're sitting across the table from another mission-driven person, that the mission-driven person from marketing just can't see the same vision that they see from the foundation. So working hard to build that alignment is another valuable place to go. I think we've also got to look at data. You know, as you know, often our data in our organizations is siloed. We have one donor data management system sitting in the foundation. We have another system that is handling our relationships with volunteers. We sometimes have another system that is handling our marketing relationships, our newsletter lists, and other things. I think we've also got to look at where is there potential to align that so we see a whole person, not just a donor, not just a community member, not just a constituent who's participated in our services, but we see a whole person. I think it moves beyond being donor-centric to being partner-centric, to being relationship-centric. You know that many of the products that are out there on the market right now, they have modules and plugins that would allow you to share data with other parts of your organization, and so it's at least something to consider. Then we've got one record of our relationship with a constituent, and we can use it to communicate with them in a more meaningful, more two-way way. We've also got to look at connections. And I know that I've put this fairly low on the list, in part because while we need those across the organization to help us build organic and growing networks, we need our stakeholders, our board members, our allies to help us reach out to others and pull them into our work. Often, it frankly doesn't happen well until you've done the other things up here. You've got to first be able to articulate what that story is, what that rationale is for fundraising, to really galvanize your constituency before we can get to a place that others can articulate that story and connect others to the work. It's having all those other things in place that give people confidence, that helps them find their words in order to connect. I see that there's a role for connection in everyone in our organization. I think when we think about connection, we most often think about our board members, our foundation board members, and our governing board members. We recognize that there's tremendous value in those allies and that they could help extend and connect us to many in the organization. But I think we also have a role for connectors who are in the front lines of our organization. We also need to harness the potential of those in leadership in our organizations to be connectors. This connecting takes many forms. It may be as simple as helping identify people who have a great love for or interest in the organization and making the philanthropy effort aware of them. Sometimes it may be that we're connecting people in other ways, that somebody walks in and says, you know, I really love your work. How do I get engaged? And they say, well, we have a foundation. And that's a way that you could connect back with the organization, that you could put your knees around our table. So having others who know how to engage and bring people into our work, it starts to create an expanding, growing, organic network that we could never emulate on our own. You know, it's like you look within your own organizations, and I would imagine that those who are devoted to philanthropy, who wake up every day brushing their teeth, thinking about partnerships with donors, is a very small number compared to the overall number of people deployed to your mission. And so I look even in our healthcare organizations, which is where I spend most of my time. And we may have a hospital that has 4,000 employees, and it may have 10 people in the development office. You know, why would we confine our ambition to connect with others and to build meaningful relationship to what can be effectively done by 10 people? Wouldn't we rather marshal the forces of the 4,000? Not to become a swarm of solicitors, to become a group of storytellers, to become connectors, to become allies, to become advocates. That's part of where culture starts to get us, that philanthropy becomes an everyone endeavor. So with that, I believe that there are valuable roles for everyone. We need to stop thinking of philanthropy and development as being the moment of solicitation. Instead, as you know, development is a vibrant spectrum of activities. It's everything from identifying those who have a love for our work to helping share the story and share the mission. Sometimes giving almost expert testimony around what we could do, where we could go, leading people in tours on the organization, articulating the case for support, soliciting gifts, providing stewardship. All of those things are valuable. And so I think with our culture for philanthropy, part of what we need to do is help everyone find their own right fit role.